Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel where you see every single bad weld I make, which we are going to be doing today. It runs, I'm so excited, but I can't run it for a very long time because there's no exhaust, and that's what we're going to try to fix today. So I've got a diesel catalytic converter, I've got a whole bunch of pipes, I've got flexi pipes, and we are going to make something that works. Is it going to be pretty? No. Is it going to work? Hopefully. So, time lapse.
So this entire segment is a bit of comedy of errors. The computer I had originally set up to run the plasma cutting table died, and I had to reset up all the software and do updates, and I didn't properly tune my plasma cutting table, so between that and the lack of material, it took me a couple of tries recutting the metal before I could get the exhaust manifold bracket cut correctly. With the material finally cut, I tried to move as much slag away from the material with a pair of pliers before going to the bench grinder. Moving back to the Kubota V2403, I installed the exhaust housing and made sure the new hardware I had bought fit. Removing the housing from the turbo, I then checked my bracket I had cut out on my CNC plasma cutting table to make sure it fit on the exhaust housing. Some of the holes didn't line up perfectly, so I ended up having to take a stepper bit and drill out some of the holes, but with that done, I was able to bolt the bracket to the housing with no issues. With the bracket and housing bolted together, it was time to reinstall it on the turbo on the Kubota V2403. Next, I took a 90-degree mandrel bit pipe and the flexi pipe to figure out where I was going to route the exhaust behind the Kubota V2403. I immediately realized I was going to hit the TV cable on the AW4 automatic transmission, so I rerouted the cable up and over one of the AC lines on the firewall to give me plenty of clearance for the exhaust. I then marked the 90-degree mandrel bent pipe on where I needed it to be cut so I could weld it to the bracket that I cut out on the CNC plasma cutting table. I had wrapped the pipe with blued painter's tape so it would help me as a guide to cut a straight line across the pipe. I first tried cutting the pipe with my cutoff wheel with my air tool, but it was just going way too slow. So I ended up borrowing what I like to call the spinning wheel of death from my father-in-law, and it cut the pipe very quickly. After cleaning the pipe on the bench grinder, I then went back to the engine bay and did some more test fitting. This is going to be a common theme throughout this entire video. I actually tried a couple of different options here. I was trying to decide if I wanted to go down at a 45-degree angle or go straight across and then have a 90-degree bend to go down and out the back. Ultimately, I decided going down at an angle and using the flexi pipe was going to be my best option. Marking where I needed to cut on the pipe, I then put blued painter's tape on again so I could cut a straight line. Once I had the pipe cut, I cleaned down the bench grinder and then test fitted it against the flexi joint. What I didn't realize at the time is that I had heated up the pipe when I had cut it and the flexi joint was cold. Once I got the temperatures equaled out, I was able to get the pipes to go into each other with no problems. And we're back to the engine bay for more test fitting. I then took a 45-degree bend mandrel pipe and cut a little bit off of it. This would be going on the other side of the flexi joint that I had just installed on the 90-degree bend of the exhaust system. Moving back again to the engine bay, I did a lot of double checking of what I was making. Once I started welding, it was going to be really difficult to restart any work if I had made a mistake. With everything looking like the way I wanted it, I marked the pipe with a permanent marker and removed the exhaust housing so I could put some tack welds on it. Here I put 4 really good tack welds on each side of the pipe so I could bolt it back to the Kubota V2403 and make sure the pipe cleared everything I needed it to clear. With everything looking good, it was time to remove the bracket from the exhaust housing and weld the pipe to the bracket. While it looks like I'm doing a whole lot, I am welding small areas at a time and rotating the pipe constantly to get good penetration between the pipe and the bracket I had cut. I then used the shop light to see if I could see any light coming through my welds. That would be a leak in the exhaust system if I could. Next, I welded the 90-degree pin to the flexi pipe. With all the welding done, I then tried cleaning off some of the splatter on my bench grinder. Next, I reinstalled the exhaust housing to the turbo with the gasket in between the two. Now it was time to install my downpipe and see if all of my careful measuring and marking worked as I had hoped. With everything looking really good from the top, I then moved to underneath the Wrangler and started figuring out how I was going to route the exhaust out the back and hopefully go over my cross member that supports the doubler and the transfer case. I realized I should install the rear exhaust pipe that goes over the rear axle so I could figure out how the exhaust system was going to connect to the front and the back. I couldn't quite get the pipe to go over the axle, so I just lifted the rear corner of the Jeep so I had more clearance to get the pipe installed. Next, I installed the rear exhaust hanger back onto the frame of the Wrangler. Now, I do need to apologize here. I didn't realize I had hit the GoPro, so you can't really see where I'm installing the mid hanger for the rear exhaust pipe onto the frame. I did end up having to use a pair of pliers to try to bend the hanger on the exhaust pipe so everything would line up correctly. Next, I installed my turbo thrush muffler to see if I would be able to clear the support bar for the transfer case and the doubler. Again, I'm doing a lot of small adjustments here because everything I can figure out here before I start welding and putting stuff permanently into place is just going to save me time down the road. Now, I will fully admit this might be cheating a little bit, but I got a universal exhaust pipe from the parts store so I could easily connect the front and rear of the exhaust system together. Taking the muffler out, I got a spare piece of pipe that I had already cut so I could use it as a coupler between the muffler and the universal flexi pipe that I had gotten from the parts store. With the piece of pipe inserted into muffler and test fitted it, I then welded it to the muffler. Moving back underneath the Wrangler and having the GoPro at a better angle this time, I then reinstalled the muffler onto the rear exhaust pipe, and you can see how I'm using the flexi pipe to go over that support bar for the transfer case and doubler. From here, I then got another 90-degree mandrel bend pipe and started to figure out how I was going to connect the downpipe to the rest of the exhaust system. I then started removing the downpipe again. The reason for this is I had actually not welded the 45-degree bend onto the flexi pipe. I had purposely done this because I didn't know where the rear of the exhaust was going to come to and if I needed to shorten or lengthen that 45-degree bend pipe. While you couldn't see it on camera, I had marked the pipe so I knew how to align it before I started my welding. Once I finished welding, it was back to the bench grinder to clean off any slag that was on the pipe. With the welds cleaned, I then reinstalled the pipe back onto the Kubota V2403 with a gasket between the pipe and the turbo exhaust housing. Next, I cut a long piece of straight pipe so I could use it on the diesel catalytic converter. I was going to be using this to connect the catalytic converter to the flexi pipe that was going over the support bar. With the extension welded onto the catalytic converter, I cleaned it on the bench grinder before moving back underneath the Wrangler to test fit the 90-degree bend and then see how everything would line up between the bend, the catalytic converter, and the flexi pipe. I'm putting a clamp on the 90-degree bend on the down pipe only to hold it in place. I am going to be removing it later and welding it. I then took the U-bolt that came with the universal exhaust pipe that I got from the parts store, and I'm actually going to weld the U-bolt to the support frame so I can help hold the exhaust in place underneath the Wrangler. While it doesn't look like it right now because I still don't have the muffler bolted into its final position, the other aim of building my own exhaust system was to make sure all of the exhaust pipes were going to hang above the bottom of the frame rails to give me as much ground clearance as possible. I'm actually using clamps between the exhaust pipe, the muffler, and the flexi pipe, so if I ever need to take any part of the exhaust off, it's not one solid piece and I won't have to cut anything off. With everything looking like it's going to line up perfectly, I quickly realized I still need to reroute the main battery cable to the starter around the dipstick tube for the transmission. And with that done, I take the downpipe off for the final time so I can weld that 90-degree bend onto the 45-degree bend that I had welded earlier. Again, while you can't see it on camera, I had marked the 45 and 90-degree bend pipes with a Sharpie in two places, so once I took off the clamp, I could align them together correctly before welding them in place. With all the welding on the down pipe complete, it was time to fish the pipe through the engine bay, install a gasket, and hopefully for the final time, bolt the down pipe in place. Lastly, I moved underneath the Wrangler to connect the down pipe to the catalytic converter with a clamp.
Okay everyone, I've got the exhaust on. I'm actually really happy with it. Again, not a welder, but I'm really happy with what I've done. The flex pipe just made connecting the two easy, though I'm kind of curious to see how loud it's going to be because that flex pipe likes to crinkle. So anyway, yeah, let's start this thing up. Fire in the hole. We have an exhaust. That went surprisingly better than I thought, truth be told. So that's all I'm going to do for this video. So yeah, you know the drill. Leave a comment down below. Tell me how bad my welding is. Give this video a thumbs up if you liked it. If you didn't, you know what to do. And hey, if you haven't subscribed, consider subscribing. And if you have, as always, thank you so much, and I'll see you in the next video very soon. Goodbye.